so we're almost done with our middle school time in my life, but I think that's the real time in life when I found girls, which are very interesting creatures. They're not much like us, but they're beautiful. But we won't go into that too much. We'll get onto that maybe a little later. But I did find out that was the time when I started playing sports seriously. That's when I played football and could run faster than most people, and I played baseball and I could throw harder than most people, and I played basketball where I could score points a lot more than most people. They were fun times. One time, three of my friends and I decided we would hitchhike all the way around Michigan. And so we split up into two people on each team, and we raced to see who could hitchhike all the way around the bottom part of Michigan. It took us a day and a half, but we won. It was funny. We found a guy about 100 miles, my partner and I, away from our little village, and he got excited that we were having a race, so he drove 85, 90 miles an hour and drove us all the way for 85 miles, way out of his way, but he wanted to see us win. So that was kind of one of the fun stories we did. Now let's kind of talk about the interesting years, the high school years. A lot of good times in high school. Probably started, really in junior high I started in the band. I had a really good friend. He played the tuba with me. His name was Leland Herford. And Leland had a sickness. First of all, his three brothers died of a sickness, and he contacted it when he was a senior. And I was a 8th grader, and we were the only two tuba players. And unfortunately, he died. And he was very good to me. He would treat me like I was the same age as him, and he really worked hard with me. So all my life, and I'm not gonna cry and be in tears now, I remember Leland. And I want him to know that I remember him. So what ended up is I was the only tuba player in one of the best bands in the United States. Our high school band was recognized by everybody. We would have people come and watch us practice other bands. We would walk in a auditorium and other bands would just get quiet and they'd look at us and say, there's Elton. There's the Elton band. Look at them. They were just impressed with us that we won so many first places. And to be the only tuba player, we went to the state, and I had actually a little solo part in that. And when it was over and the judge wrote in the paper, we got a 1, of course, but he wrote in the paper, the little tuba player really played hard. He's not the best, but he sure plays hard. So that was the first time I was ever recognized as a tuba player. So that was kind of funny. The other thing that was interesting, my sister was the head majorette, and she was the big deal of the whole band. She kind of led the band wherever we went, and she was the big person on there, and she did not like me being in the band as an 8th grader. And she let me know how unimportant I was to the band most of the time. Now, I truly love my sister, and she was great with me. But if you look, I have a tooth that's kind of missing here, a little chip, and that's because one day she hit me in the face with her baton when she got mad at me. She had a little bit of a bit in her temper, I guess. But I forgave her over time, and she was great to me all my life, so I was very fortunate to have her for a sister. My grades in high school weren't the best. I didn't study. My sister was a straight A student. My brother, who come right after her, was a straight D and F student, and he was very lucky he could play sports. Some of the teachers, I think, actually went out of their way so he could play sports, because you had to have a C average. So they kind of helped him so he could play. He was a very good athlete also, although he was only 5'3" and weighed probably 140 pounds. As a freshman, I was huge. I was 5'11", 97 pounds. So everybody thought I was going to follow in his footsteps. But as a freshman in the football season, I was a starting quarterback on the freshman team, and he was a starting quarterback on the varsity team. And we were playing a game one time, and the head coach said if the varsity didn't score in the first quarter, that he was bringing the freshman team in. Well, they didn't score in the first quarter, and true enough to his words, the coach brought in the freshman team. And I got kind of lucky and threw a touchdown pass. My brother was not too happy with that. He was a senior. So having his younger brother outshine him did not make him happy. So the next practice, somebody knocked me down, and then one of them ran over my legs with their cleats, which hurt. If you've ever seen a football shoes with those cleats on, they're hard and they hurt. But they thought that was fun, and they had a lot of fun with me. One time they left me hanging from a tree nude by my ankles. My mother had to cut me down. They weren't really mean. That might sound mean to you, but to me, that was just boys being boys. They kind of considered me one of them, which I really thought was great. And one of the reasons I think I become a college athlete in 3 sports was that they let me play with them. They would call me and say, hey, we need an extra player, Jerry. Come out and play with us seniors. And I'd get to go play with them. And it really helped me become a very good athlete. Our freshman year of basketball, I played on the junior varsity, and all my brother and his friends played on the varsity. And I can remember the coach getting so mad at them every time I'd score against them. They said, that little kid, he's only not even 5 foot, and he's scoring against a varsity. How can that happen? And the other interesting thing, when my brother played his last game, and the coach took him out, we were at a tournament, the final state tournament. They took him out and they put me in his place. So I actually got to follow my brother out on his last time playing. A lot of people might not think my brother and I were good friends, but in our own way, we were very good friends. He was a Michigan fan and I was a Michigan State fan. So it wasn't unusual when I was a freshman and he was a senior that we would walk out in the backyard with a football and go one-on-one against each other. He would be singing the Michigan fight song and I'd be singing the Michigan State fight song, and we'd go about 2 times tackle each other, and then it was a fist fight. That's usually the way it ended. Now my brother, although I probably was a little better athlete than him, he was a much better baseball player than me, and he was at 5'3", was called up by the Detroit Tigers twice to try out to play professional baseball. He had an arm like a rocket, and his greatest joy in life was hitting me with a baseball when we'd go out to the barn and I'd pitch to him and then he'd pitch to me, and if he hit me, he thought that was really funny. So I was never a good hitter after that, all because of him. Somebody throw a ball at me, I was getting out of the way. So I never was much of a batting average. In fact, for you people to understand sports, my batting average, best batting average, and I lettered 4 years in baseball, was .66. I got 1 hit. I bunted, the pitcher slipped getting off the mound, so I beat it out to first base, and that's the only hit I ever got. But I did get 2 offers to try out, one with the New York Giants and one with the Detroit Tigers. I never went because I knew I wasn't much of a baseball player. During my years in high school, it's hard to explain, and these are gifts from God, of course. I got to be in both junior and senior plays. I was head of the student body my senior year. It's all state in basketball, all state in track, all state in band, leading scorer, rusher in football, at least baseball. I guess I made second team all league and got the offers to play professional ball. So I had quite a high school year. But we were real poor at the time, and when I'd go to school sometimes, my sister was away to college. Like I say, she was brilliant, so she got to go to college. And she left some sweaters behind, and there were times when I'd wear her sweaters to school because I really didn't have anything else to wear. I didn't get to go to many dances and things like the other kids do, proms and all that, because I just didn't have the money to go. I did get a job finally, and that was scrubbing floors at the local post office. I'm sorry, the telephone office in the back. And in those days, we still had the operators that would take one plug and plug it in for one person and plug it into the other so they could talk. The old-fashioned telephone. So here I am down on my hands and knees scrubbing floors while these ladies are talking on the phone, and I clean the bathrooms. But that gave me spending money, so at least I could go to dances and things like that. During the summer, one summer I painted barns for a whole $1 an hour, 3 stories high on a ladder, painting a barn for $1 an hour. Today that would be unbelievable. Those people probably make $100 an hour or more. Then one year I hoed beans, and the next summer I pitched peas off a semi-truck into a little thing that shuck them, and the peas would come out and the shucks would go the other way. That is the hardest work I've ever done in my life, because the peas would be 12 feet long, the vines, and you'd have to pick them up and put them into this little thing, but with a pitchfork, but you just couldn't get a small amount unless somebody knew what they're doing when they're layering them in. And by the time I went home at night, I couldn't lift my arms. But, maybe $1 an hour, so it gave me some money so I could buy a couple shirts and a couple pair of pants for school the next year. Most of my friends were well-dressed and had money. And they didn't look down on me that I can think. They were really very nice to me. To be, head of the student body showed that I was well liked at least, so that was nice. A lot of good things went on. I learned something in life then. From being on the top, I did something that I'd done through my whole life. I talked to everybody in school. I didn't care if it was a lady or a girl that had the red hair and the freckles and wasn't the most pleasant to look at. I made sure I said good morning to her every morning. The girl that picked her nose and ate it. And that's a true story. She was a straight A student. But I made sure I said hi to Mary every morning. So I would make my rounds saying good morning to all my classmates. It didn't matter who they were or what they were. To me, they were important. And that kind of helped out in my coaching career later on, as one principal put it when he hired me. He said, the reason we are going to hire you, and this was the biggest school in Alaska, the reason we're going to hire you is because you care for everybody. You don't care just for the stars. You care for the little people, and you go out of your way to make sure they're enjoying their time too. So it was something that I learned in high school that really helped. Also about the 11th grade, I wanted to know why I had all these talents, and I think I've maybe said this before, but I didn't understand, so I started reading the Bible. And after reading the Bible, I understood that anything you get, it comes from God. So God had given me all these talents. So I decided it was time that I paid God back a little bit and started going to church, and actually went to a revival meeting. And for you that don't know what a revival meeting is, because I don't have many of them anymore, a revival meeting is a tent that they put up, and many people would be under the tent, maybe 500 people. And they'd call you forward if you wanted to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. So this tent that I was under was mostly high school kids from all over the area. And nobody walked up at first, and I said, I'm going to show that I thank Christ. So I walked up front by myself. And after I went up, many people started coming up. And I was blessed and accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior that night. Probably the biggest night of my life. And after that, many people changed their attitude even better towards me, treated me better, thought more of me, and I think I was even blessed more. One of the stories I tell is of my father. Him and I had a rough beginning. My older brother was small, and my dad was 5'2", so he was also small, so he kind of stood up for my older brother. By the way, I was 5'7" when I was a junior. I was really tall. In our family, that is. But Dad and I didn't see eye to eye, and he let my brother take the car whenever he wanted, even when he was younger. But I was 16 and didn't even have a driver's license, and Dad wouldn't take me to get a driver's license. He didn't want me driving for some reason. I guess he didn't trust me at 16, which is the legal age to drive in Michigan. But one snowy Christmas Eve, I was getting ready to walk to church. It was about 8 blocks. And just as I was getting ready to leave, my father walked up and said, you know, if you're good enough to at least go to church and I'm not, you shouldn't have to walk. And he handed me the car keys. That was the first time I've ever driven our car. But I did drive some of my friends' cars, so I knew how to drive. But it was a big turning point in my father's and my life. After that, we became closer and closer and closer. And he never missed a basketball, well, I can't say baseball. He went to all my brother's baseball games, but I was such a poor baseball player, he didn't want to watch me play. And he didn't like track, so he never went to one of the track meets. Now in track, I held all the records in our area. In fact, some of them I held for 19 years. After I was out of school, I still held them for 19 years. So he did go to my last track thing, and he complimented me how well I ran. I set the school record, and I set the conference record, and I set the regional record. I think that was because he was there. But my mother would go to all the games, and football games in Michigan can be brutal with the cold weather and the rainy weather, but either one of them never missed a football game. And my mother never missed she missed one basketball game in 25 years. And that was because she had a baby the night of the game. 3 nights later, she was back for the next game. She loved basketball. She loved watching it. And my mother was a little different. But back to my father for just a second. I remember one night he couldn't come to the game. He listened to it on radio, and I had to go pick him up after he was at work. He was a bartender, and he was bartending out of town in another bar, and I went and picked him up. And on the way home, he said, you know, son, I'm really proud of you. That meant a lot. You have to understand, the old German way of life was not saying, I love you. In fact, I was 56 years old before my father ever told me he loved me. My mother told me she loved me when I was 21 and I was named outstanding student on campus at the college that I attended. And they brought her and my sister into that ceremony because they wanted to surprise me. It's the highest award that college gives. And to my knowledge, I'm the longest living person to hold that. My mother, in today's world, although I think she loved me, I'm pretty sure she loved me, probably would be in jail. She was not she had a little bit of a temperament, let's put it that way. I can remember one time I didn't like her roast beef, and she just hauled off and hit me in the nose so bad that my nose started bleeding, and I ran out of the house. I was probably 9, 10 years old. And I went out so I wouldn't bleed on the floor or bleed on the table. I thought I was doing the right thing. Well, she come out and grabbed me by the hair and started whacking me and dragged me back into the house because she said, you're trying to embarrass me coming out here. Well, nobody would have known how I got the bloody nose, but that's the way she was. But there are other times that she could be a loving mother. Not the time she picked up the chair and threw it at me when I was 15, or the time she grabbed my ears and hit me in the head with her knuckles. But there were times. I remember one time, she was a tremendous seamstress, and she made me a beautiful green jacket. And I was so proud of that jacket, and I think a lot of it was because she had made it for me. And I know I've talked to my brothers at different times and my sister about our mother, and they agreed with me that she was a very harsh lady. And they had problems. I had seen my mother a week before she died, and I lived many miles away from her, so I did not go back for the funeral. But I'd seen her a week before she died, and we talked, and our last words were, "I love you, Mom," and "I love you, son." And she did not know I was her son, to tell you the truth. She had dementia for 10 years. She always would say to me when I was there, she said, "You know, I don't know who you are, but you're awful nice." But my other brother, one of my younger brothers didn't come, and I asked him, I said, "Why didn't you come to Mom's funeral?" He says, "I had so many bad memories." So I wasn't the only one. And I also asked my older brother one time what he thought of our mother, and he said she was something else. So it wasn't just me, and I pray for her all the time. It's tough saying that. I did not know my parents were alcoholics until I was out of college. They would drink anywhere from 6 to 10 beers on a normal day and 12 to 14 on a Saturday and Sunday. Both my grandfathers were alcoholics. One was mean, one was jolly. The jolly one, thank goodness, lived in the town where I lived. The mean one lived out. But there were times when I'd go stay with them. And I had a dog, I remember one time, and my grandpa got drunk. He was going to shoot my dog, and my grandmother and I were trying to stop him from shooting the dog. He was just a character. Looked like Abraham Lincoln. But he also was part Indian. In the olden days, when I was young, the olden days, they had what they called the Indian law. And the Indian law was that if your husband was a drunk, the wife could go to the local bars and say, "My husband's part Indian, he can't take alcohol, I do not want him served." And by doing that, the bars would not serve him, which just drove my grandfather nuts, of course, because he couldn't get his beer. He never beat my grandmother, though, which I'm thankful for. My grandmother's name was Genevieve Sophie. But I wonder what her real name was, because she was 100% Indian. She was a squaw. And I would have liked to know. My mother said she didn't know her name either, but she knew it was not Genevieve Sophie. They moved here from Quebec, Canada, and I think when she came down here, they changed their name, her name anyway. He was Joseph Sophie, 100% French. So when my grandfather was sober, they were really fun to stay with. She'd make me so many pancakes. I think I ate 12 pancakes. That was my record. And she thought that was great that I loved her pancakes. And they lived out kind of in a farm area. And one of my cousins, his mother had died, and he was the same age as me, and he lived with them. His name was Dick Dreher. So I would go, and that would be my time and my cousin Dick that we'd be together, and we had many adventures. We loved to pick blueberries, because if we picked a bunch of blueberries, Grandma would make us blueberry pancakes. But we would go in the woods, and we'd go all over and have great adventures on our hikes all over the place. And Dick and I became friends and stayed friends for many, many years. Unfortunately, he died a young man. He was sick with, I can't remember what it was now, but unfortunately lost Dick very early. So that was interesting times for me when we would do that. In high school, I was popular with the girls. I had many girlfriends. I can remember we used to call it going steady, that when you're supposed to be going out with just one girl. Well, on our little place in Michigan, there was 5 miles away was Pigeon, where I was going steady with a doctor's daughter. 10 miles away was Bad Axe, where I was going steady with an eye doctor's daughter. 15 miles away was Cass City, where I was going steady with another doctor's daughter. And the nice thing about doctor's daughters is they all got cars. I didn't have a car, so they would pick me up. I can still remember my mother coming out on the porch and yelling at them, calling them names. And not nice names because they were picking me up instead of me picking them up. But there were girls in my town too that I went out with quite a few. The girl I first fell in love with comes from a very wealth farming family. I had a couple of fights with guys over her. One guy I remember was 6'6", about 180 pounds. At that time I was 5'7", 135. Wasn't kind of a fair fight, but thank goodness we wrestled instead of punched. I remember I walked up to him and I said, I'm going to get the first swing, and I hit him as hard as I could, and he just looked at me like, what was that? So I thought, uh-oh, I'm done. So I tackled him, and we rolled around on the ground. Finally, some people broke it up. But Barbara Ackerman, to this day, I wonder where she's at. Like all first loves, you wonder where they're at. I remember one day, though, she did come to town on her horse and came to where I was at and talked to me. I still remember that day, and I did take her out. I couldn't take anybody out because I didn't have any money. But a friend of mine had a car, and I got to sit in the back seat with her. Well, they were in the front seat with his girlfriend, so I got to go with her a couple of times. It's kind of interesting because I was pretty well known because I go to all these dances. You know, every weekend, I told you before, we'd go to dances, we'd hitchhike, but now that we were in high school, somebody always had a car that we could go. But one time when I was a junior, I think it was, a friend of mine and I couldn't find a ride, so we decided we'd hitchhike about 12 miles to a resort area where all the rich girls from Detroit would come and all this. And we were walking along, and there were 4 girls picked us up. And we got in the car and we got talking, and you know, they were asking us questions, and one girl says, do you know Jerry Bittner? And I said, yeah, I know him pretty well. Why? She says, he's really good looking, I've heard. Do you know him very well? Will you introduce me to him? I said, yeah, I'll introduce you to him. They say he's a fantastic dancer too. Can he dance? I said, yeah, he's a good dancer. So then as we got there, they said, by the way, you know, we got to the dance and we were starting to go, by the way, what do we call you? You know, and the other guy says, I'm Jim Granel. And I said, well, I'm Jerry Bittner. And the girl just jumped back. She says, who? I said, I'm Jerry Bittner. And she turned beet red. And so it was really funny, but I did dance with her. And I did get a couple of kisses that night. So that was a good night. Jim and I would have a lot. Jim was my best friend. We'd have a lot of fun. Jim lived with his grandmother, so we could have girls over to this house because his grandmother always went to bed early. But Jim was a character too. So one time we went to the Dairy Queen to get an ice cream cone. So when I got up there, I played like I was a deaf mute. And Jim would say he wants chocolate, and he wants a medium size. So the girl got it, and she kind of looked at me like, oh, poor guy, poor guy. So after she gave it to me, I said, thank you. And her face just went, I've been taken. So we had a lot of fun. I had a Volkswagen. My dad had a Volkswagen, and that's what I drove if I ever got, you know, the car. So we'd take that Volkswagen and we'd lay it, 4 of us, we'd go out in the snowbank and we'd turn it on its side in the snowbank, and we'd put red paint on our mouth, and people would drive up and we'd be hanging out of the car. And they'd, oh, we'll call the ambulance, we'll call the ambulance. And then we start laughing, jump in, push the car back over on its wheels and take off. And I'll tell you one thing too, you know, they say Volkswagens float. They do not float. We tried driving my Volkswagen into Lake Huron. We had a heck of a time getting it out because that sucker did not float. So we finally got it ashore and dried out and got it home. We had a lot of fun with that car. One time I was supposed to stay in town. I wasn't supposed to leave town. Dad was mad at me for something, and we decided we were going over to Bad Axe to see some girls over there. Dad was working, and the Volkswagen was just sitting there in the driveway, but what we had was a great big turning thing and a suction cup, and you could put it on the back. It looked like you could wind up the Volkswagen. So we put that suction cup on back, and we went to Bad Axe, and we had to stop at the stoplight. Only stoplight in the Thumb, which is this area of Michigan. and it happened to be right by the newspaper office. So a newspaper seen Jim out there winding up our Volkswagen, so he come out and took a quick picture. Unfortunate, it was on the front page of the newspaper the next day when my dad picked up the newspaper. So he knew we had went out of town, and I didn't get the car for a few weeks and got a pretty good chewing out. My father had a temper, but I'll say one thing, he never touched any of his children. I never saw him touch a child. Now, spanked, my mother did all spanking. She threatened us with Dad, but Dad just wasn't that type of individual. I guess I can tell a story about my dad. When he died, my father never made $10,000 a year, but he was a volunteer fire chief for 45 years of our little village. Very well thought of by many, many people. And when he died, they took his casket and they put it in the back of a 1938 fire engine. Now this was in 2000 something, early 2000. They put it in the back, his coffin, and they had to take it from the church to the graveyard, and they had to go through three towns to get there. Now remember, this man had no money, but every town had lowered its flags. When we came with 5 county police chiefs in front of the fire truck, and the fire department trailing 200 cars, everybody pulled off the road. And it was, I guess this is a story you need to hear. My father was prejudiced. My oldest niece had a baby out of wedlock. It was a black baby. And my father said to her, "I'll never have that bastard in my home. Don't you ever bring that black bastard to my home." Not much like my dad, because he loved children. And it really hurt, not only her, but me tremendously, because I loved her and I loved my father, of course. And my brother, who was also prejudiced, went and got his shotgun. He was going to go look for the guy and shoot him. But this was my family. And the neat part of the story is Tony was his name, and finally Dad let her bring him to the farm, and she brought him when he was 5 years old, and Tony was just a beautiful little baby at 5. I mean, he was just cute little, chubby little cheeks on him and his curly hair, and she had him dressed really nice with tennis shoes on and white socks. It was just, he just was a cute little kid. Well, I was supposed to be watching him in the house. Everybody was gone. I don't know where my niece went, but she was gone. And Dad was out hoeing his garden, and I was in the house with Tony. Well, Tony slipped outside on me, and I didn't see him go, but he got out on the gravel driveway. And I was in the kitchen, and something stopped me, and it's got to be the guy up above. I said, "No, you just stand right here and watch from the window. You'll learn something." So I stood there, and Tony got out on the gravel, and he fell. And he had shorts on, so of course the gravel poked his legs. And he sat there crying because he was hurt. And Dad's in the garden, maybe 20, 25 feet away from him. And he looked at him and shook his head and kept weeding. Tony kept crying. Dad kept looking at him. Tony kept crying. Finally, Dad couldn't take it anymore. Threw down the hole, walked over, picked Tony. He said, "I don't know where that Jerry is, but I'm going to give him." And he held Tony and took him inside. I left the kitchen because I wanted Dad to take care of him. I didn't want to wash him. I wanted Dad to wash his legs up. And Dad did wash his legs up and put a Band-Aid on him and held him. And it was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. did my father use the word nigger. No longer did he knock black people. No longer did my brother, because now this was his grandson. He come to love Tony. In fact, my brother would drive. Tony became a singer, a very accomplished singer. My brother would drive all by himself in the winter from Detroit to Chicago, which takes about 4.5 hours to hear him sing, and then fly back or drive back the same night. But my father, when he died, like I Tony were so close. So when he died, Tony, of course, came home, and he sang Amazing Grace. At his funeral, everybody cried. There was, because they all knew the story. And this is what God had done. Brought those two together. And then at the graveyard, Tony also was an accomplished trumpet player. So he played, Dad was in the service, so he played taps, which is played at all the veterans. So it was just a beautiful thing. I guess kind of to close out my high school year, it might be interesting to find out how I got to college. After my last football game, I couldn't afford to go to the dance because I didn't have any money. So I went out and sat on the football bleachers, just myself and talking to God. By the way, I had a good night that night. I ran for 2 touchdowns, threw for another 1, gained 180 yards, had 10 tackles. So I really had a good game. That's beside the point. Anyway, I was talking to God, and I didn't know at that time if I wanted to become a minister or what I was going to do with my life. At that time, the Vietnam War was just starting, and most of my friends were being drafted or volunteering to go to the war. We had a factory in our town that was out of Detroit that made car parts, and many of my friends lost fingers and hands at it. It wasn't a safe plant. And I knew I couldn't go to college because I was a C student, so I couldn't get an academic scholarship. I was only 5'7", and although I was a good athlete, nobody would want a 5'7" basketball player. And even though I got offers to play Major League Baseball, I knew that wouldn't work out. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And then interesting enough, as I talked to the Lord that night, I said, you know, I don't think I can go into the ministry. I just don't feel I'm good enough. And I think that's a special person, but I'll make you a deal. Now, can you make a deal with God? No. But anyway, I said, I'll go wherever you want me to go, and I'll do whatever you want me to do outside of being a pastor. Now, sometimes you don't say things like that to God, because if we go on, you're going to find out that I've had quite a life. I have friends in 63 different countries. I've worked with 31 different countries. Do you think he kind of took me at my word a little bit there to go around and see what the world was much like? The other thing, he kind of said to me, what's your 3 wishes? You know, like you see a genie, you kind of, and I said, well, I was young at the time, and I said, well, first of all, I'd like to marry a model. I liked women, and I still do like beautiful women. And I'd like to coach high school basketball sometime. And I'd like to make $10,000. So it was almost like okay. So interesting enough, 2 weeks later, there was a college coach that came to speak at our school about a new school they were opening called Northwood University. And unbeknown to me, our basketball coach went and talked to him and told him about me, and he was interested, and they sent me a letter, and they said, we're interested in you coming to Northwood University to play basketball for us. We can, if your IQ is good enough, and you had to take a test to pass to show that your IQ was good enough, we'll give you a scholarship and we'll help you find a job and we'll help get you through college. Well, what I didn't know was this basketball coach was one of the founders. Him and another man, his name was Gary Stauffer, and the other man was Arthur Turner. And they had left another college, Alma College, and they were going to start their own college, a business college that was built on free enterprise, built on what America stands for. And nobody thought those two men would be very successful with their college. But anyway, of course, that was my only out here. I didn't think I had a chance to go to college, and I was going to get a chance at least to fill out an application for one. So I went and filled out the application, and my IQ was higher than what I knew. And they accepted me. And I was 5'7" at the time, and I had 3 months before I had to go to college, so I earned some money. My brother-in-law gave me a job washing cars, so that helped pay for some of it. And I remember one of the things that still hurts a little bit was my mother drove me to where I was going to be staying, unloaded my luggage, and she just drove off. She really didn't say, "I love you, son," or "have a good time," or boom, the way she went. So here I was standing there all by myself, knowing nobody. I'd never met the coach yet or anything. So I went in and I had 3 roommates, and thank goodness all 3 of them were intelligent, nice guys. So we got along right from the beginning. 3 of them were Christians, and we'd actually walk to church, the 3 of us, every Sunday, and we become quite close. But I found out that I made the basketball team. The coach was walking down the aisle one day, and he stopped me. "Hey, Jerry, come here." And I went over, and he says, "Here." He says, "This is the order for the uniforms, for our basketball uniforms." And it had a note attached to it, and he says, "Read the note." So I read the note, and he says, "Dear Coach Stauffer, we noticed that you ordered 11 uniforms, 10 are normal size, and 1 is quite small. Do you have a mascot?" Well, that was my uniform. So I got to find out that I made the team before anybody else did. There were 15 All-Staters that were trying for 10 spots, so I beat out 6 of them. So that was kind of interesting, and that was the start of my college career. Like they said, they gave me a scholarship, and I worked in the kitchen. I didn't have money for food, so I would get food that was left over every day and take it back to my dorm, and I'd keep it, and that's where I'd get my food from. Sometimes you wonder how you do those kind of things and how you get through it all, but I did get through it all. The surprising thing, if you remember, I was 5'7", and when I got there I was 5'10", which made the coach very happy. I was a C student, but the interesting thing was my first year I was an A student in college, straight A's. So here I went from being 5'7" to 5'10" to a C student to an A student. You kind of wonder how those things happen, don't you? When somebody says there's no God to me, I just laugh at them, because that could only be Him. My chance of getting to college could only be because of Him. So I think we'll end this here for a little while, and I'll take kind of a rest, and then we'll kind of talk about my college days a little bit, and then we'll go into my work a little bit.